Model Making Guru is sponsored by emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs. emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Fox from Model Making Guru here. Hello and welcome to the second part in our painting guide for the Games Workshop Vex Machinator Archlord Discordant, the beautiful new kit that came out just a few days ago, about a week ago now, and it's just been released. And I think when we put the first video up yesterday, because this is part 2, as far as I could tell, it was not only the first painting tutorial on YouTube, yes, it was also, when I did a Google search, the first painting tutorial anywhere. So I'm like, wow, I was the first. That's awesome. So hopefully I'll be a millionaire by the end of the week. I won't be. I'd love it though, if everybody just watched this one. Even the Warhammer TV one's not up yet, if they do one. So it's fantastic. So yes, well done me. I was the first one up. I was up to 4:30 this morning getting it done because I wanted to get up there and get it up online. So yeah, yay, happy me. Anyway, this is episode 2. We're going to crack on. We've not got all the base colours done. As you can see, there's still some left to do. But we've got the basic armour of the beast down and the gold trim. Again, it's not the finished gold trim. This is halfway through the gold trim process. It's just the base colours. We've got some bits and bobs to do. I think today we'll have some small amount to do on here, and then we've got a lot to do on the figure to get him finished. And then I think just basing it and we're done. So it won't be hopefully too long an episode today. Now you will note I have glued on the exhausts. They can go on now because we've painted the bit in there, the bit that looked like a bit of a brain, so I've done that. They're now glued on, just glued on with super glue, and that is ready for paint. So we're going to crack on, we're going to get this guy done. If you didn't watch the first episode, then just to fill you in, I have designed these as 2 separate sub-assemblies, which caused me some problems because the reins broke, and I've had to repair them and then cover up the repair with some easy line rubber thread, so it looks like an extra piece of sort of rein, like a rope in his hand. If you're wondering what all this stuff is, it was to hide the repair. Also, I put some up here as well, just to give it some extra detail. It's easy line, so it's bendable and flexible. Just makes it look interesting, gives it some character, but it also hides the repair. Now I'll go and get everything ready. I'll get the scruffy painting mat out. You always know when we're painting because the scruffy mat comes out. This is the clean Sunday best mat. And we'll crack on with the painting. We're going to start off back on the beast. Okay, before we get going, I'll just make you aware, if you didn't watch the last episode, that I am using pretty much mostly Citadel paints for this, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions. And I will be using my wet palette that I made myself by my own fair hand, yes. Now, if you don't know what a wet palette is, or why you want one, or why you need one, or how it will make your painting a billion times better, click up here, there's a link, and that will take you to my video where I explain what it is, how you make it, and why it will make your life better. It costs you a few quid, and you'll just find painting a much more fun experience. Now, I also have to apologise if you hear lots of banging and knocking in the background. I don't know if you can, like that, if you can hear it now. One of my neighbours seems to be disassembling something very violently, and I don't quite know what or why. But it's a beautiful, hot, sunny day, and I can't have the window closed because I would die. So you might have to put up with some knocking and banging. Anyway, let's crack on. Now, if you remember when we painted this in the last episode, this gold part here, these 2 bits on the brain butt there, I didn't shade those with Ryken Flesh Shade when I did the rest of the trim. It's because I want these to share the same shade, share the smashing, outstanding marine. Well, I don't know where that came from. I want these to have the same shade as the exhaust pipes which are about to paint. So I didn't shade those. I forgot to actually mention it live, so I put a caption on. But yeah, they're still just bare Retributor armour. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off, first of all, with some Balthazar Gold. I've got some on my wet palette here. Let me get a little tiny touch of water. Balthazar Gold's quite thick, so even if you are using a wet palette, and it's got some moisture on it, you might want to add the tiniest of bits of water to it just to help it flow better off the brush. And what we're going to paint here is first of all, we're going to paint these 2 exhausts, not the piping at the bottom, just the sort of the exhaust part, this bit here. We've also got the strange sort of demon faces that are attached to it, a secondary exhaust. They're quite charming. They are skulls, but we're going to paint the whole thing Balthazar Gold. And also, the other thing we're going to paint with the Balthazar Gold is the ammunition on this ammo belt. Now, there's basically the shells themselves. There's the feeder sort of, well, I don't know what you call this bit, the bit that the shells actually go in, which is usually like cloth or material, but we're don't worry about that right now. If you get some of the Balthazar gold on there, it's fine. And I'm going to paint the front of the shell as well, but I'm actually going to come back to those and paint the very tips a different colour later. I want basically to suggest a bronze or brassy case, a casing for the ammunition with a silver tip, and we'll paint the feeder belt again later. So I need to get all these done. Let me just start on this one. A bit more water in my paint. Oops. There we go. So I'll get these done, and when we come back, we'll do the next step, which will be, can you guess it? Yeah, it'll be shading. You know it'll be shading. So there we have the Balthazar gold on the exhaust and on the munitions. The next step is, once that's dried, is to go in with our shade. And for this, we're going to use Agrax Earth Shade, which, if you remember on the gold, the other parts of the gold, we used Reikland Flesh Shade. On this, we want to use Agrax, and we want to use this on these exhausts and on these things in the middle. We're not going to put it on the ammunition though, they'll get dealt with later. It's just on the exhaust, and you want to be reasonably generous. You want to make sure it goes into all the little recesses. And what we're going to do is actually more than one coat, because you want this to be quite dark. So when it's dried, give it 10-15 minutes, maybe a bit more, to dry, and then come back in and do a second coat, maybe even a third coat. We're going to be doing a heat staining effect over the course of this episode, and you want it to look quite dark. Okay, so you can see there the kind of darkness I wanted to achieve with the Agrax Earth Shade. It's a really nice dark colour, and that will become apparent later on when we do the next step on that. Now, like I've said before in other things, we're going to be doing a matte varnish at some point, so there's a lot of stuff I'm going to leave till after the matte varnish. So we're going to stop, like with the gold, we're going to stop halfway through and come back to it later. Next, we need to do a little bit of something on the ammunition belt, and I have to apologise, I did put some Agrax Earth Shade on there in the end. I kind of forgot and just did it and was like, oh. So it's a one coat. That was 3 coats of Agrax Earth Shade, that's 1. So what I want to do now is paint the ammo belt that the actual ammunition is in. So I have on my wet palette some Skaven Blight Dinge, which is a wonderful colour. Just going to get some on my wet palette here. Nothing too complicated for this bit. Once that's dried, the next step then is to go in with, you guessed it, a shade. If you haven't learnt the routine yet, it's base colours, shades, highlights, more or less. So we're going to use Nuln Oil to just shade the ammo belt. I'm going to try and be very neat and just keep it to the ammo belt and not to the actual rounds, because they're a different colour. They don't want a black shade. Okay, so that's the shade dried. So next we're going to do the highlights, and we're going to dry brush some Dawnstone. Now I have to tell you, because it's a hot, well, I was going to say a summer's day, but it's not summer, it's a hot summery day. All I can smell from outside, apart from the usual, well, all I can hear, obviously, is all the usual garden stuff, but all I can smell is barbecues firing up. And I am starving, and I'm not going to eat anything until dinner time later on today, and it's like, it's torture. So I've got some Dawnstone here. I've got my old dry brush, my old base brush, not my old dry brush. Remember, don't use a good base brush, use an old base brush. What I'm going to do is quickly run it down this here. Just very, very gently. Just run it down the ammo belt just to get it to pick up on the tops. And the reason I'm doing this as dry brush, you don't have to do this as dry brush, I just find it easier and faster. I want it to have that slight canvassy feel to it. And a dry brushing gives you a slightly rougher texture. The next step is just to bring the silver to the tips of the ammunition. And on this we're just going to use, to start with for now, we're just going to use lead belcher just to get the tips painted. Now there is a little bit of bronze of the original Balthazar gold in the little recess between the tip and the casing. So you want to try and leave that as best you can. It's just the tips. Okay, next up we need to get all the pipes and tubes painted. Now it's completely up to you how you want to paint these. There's no official guidelines. I'm going to do a mixture of, say, I've got some Eshin grey, I might use some Mephiston red, maybe some Cantor blue, but I'm going to just use some base colours in different colours to start with, and then we'll give them a wash of Null to shade them, and then we'll go over with the original colour again just to bring back some highlights. So I'm not going to show you all of that because it's the same for each one, but for this one, for example, I'm going to do some Eshin Grey, and we'll just get this bit painted here. And like I say, once these are all done in whatever colours you want, you can do whatever you want. Some of the photographs show stripes. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Just give it a shade with Null Oil, and then go back over with the original colour just to create a highlight area. Okay, so that's all the tubes done. You can see there I used a different colour I didn't mention before. I used Avalanche Sunset, and to shade that, instead of using Null Oil, I used Agrax Earthshade because it's a bit more complementary with the yellow than the Null Oil. Then once all the pipes and tubes are dried, any that have got these little exposed bits of metal, I just touch those in with some lead belcher just to make them stand out a bit. So what is next? Next, we need to do something with this syringe. We're not going to paint the dribbly bits of toxins and poisons yet. They'll come towards the end. But we need to do something with this syringe. And on the box art, it shows like a sort of blue colour between these little metal bits that go around it. We're going to do something similar. We're not going to do it exactly the same. I'm going to use clear colours. And what we need to do is get this painted white first for the clear colour to go on top. Now, I don't recommend just painting things just white straight off the bat because white is a horrible colour. What I'm going to do is paint Celestra Grey first as a basing colour, neutral base colour. Then I can paint the white on top, and that'll just give the white something to look bold with. White's kind of a transparent colour, so if you paint it over most colours it will look horrible and patchy. Over a nice neutral grey or warm sort of sandy tone, it'll look quite solid. So we're going to do that first. It's easier for me to do it rather than try to explain it to you. We're going to paint some Celestra Grey first. Get some on my brush. And here we're going to be really careful. If we screw up and get some on these little metal rods that go up and down, that's not a major problem. I can touch those in later. But I'll just be as careful as I can and just paint in the middle with the Celestra Grey. You can see I've got a bit on that metal bit, but that's fine. I can touch that in later when I'm done. Okay, so that's the grey painted. You can see I have gone a bit messy over some of these metal sort of bits in the middle. That's fine, we're going to touch those back in again later. You can just paint over them if you want to. Next up, we're going to go over with some white scar. And like I say, the reason for the Celestra Grey is because white scar is a bit transparent. So if you just painted over just with white scar, you'd have to do quite a few coats and it would look terrible. So at least with this neutral grey now, we can go in and probably just get away with one quick coat. So let's get that done. Maybe two coats. Yeah. Okay, so with the white dry, we're going to use a non-Citadel colour. I know. We are going to use Ammo by Mig Periscope Green AMIG 096. I love this colour. If ever you wanted like a VDU green screen, it's a perfect colour for that. So we're going to do that. And all we're going to do is, this is a clear colour but it's reasonably thin, so what we're going to do is actually just blob it all over. Now because it's transparent, it'll collect around the edges where there's a little edge. It'll sort of collect there and be thinner in the middles, and what you'll get is this wonderful sort of slight shading effect. Hopefully I can see all this slight shading effect where it'll be darker towards the middle where the metal bit is, which again we're going to repaint later, so don't worry about that. So just get it all around this part of the syringe. And now that's had a chance to dry, hopefully you can sort of get what I was talking about when I was saying how it'll sort of stick to edges and corners but pull away from sort of the raised parts, and that's how you get this nice shaded effect. Because we painted with the white first and then the clear green, and because it's a clear colour, when the surface tension does pull it away from the flat areas and down into the recesses, you get that nice shaded look. Now it's a bit glossy right now, but once it's been matte varnished it'll blend into everything else, it'll look fantastic. And if we need to give it a little bit of gloss right at the end, we can do, to suggest like a glass vial type thing, we can do that. Now that's going to do it for the beast for now. We've done pretty much everything we need to do, or that we're going to be able to do at this point. We've got some bone things that we need to do, but we'll do those later. And then we've got all the layering of the gold and some other bits and bobs, and layering on the metallics that we'll do once the matte varnish has been done, and once we know we're not going to lose any glossy, shiny stuff that we put on top. So I'm going to put this to one side, and we'll crack on with the dude. Okay, so here's the dude. Now, hopefully there won't be too much to do on this. I don't think there's that much. We've got some reds and some metallics to do, and some bone little details. So I think we're getting towards the end now. I have, obviously, you can see, done a lot of stuff already, but this is just stuff that we've already done on the beast. So it's just where I've duplicated things, but I haven't shown you everything because that would be a bit boring. So the first thing we're going to do is, we are going to do the metallic. So we're going to go back to Lead Belcher. And for this, we've just got a few things we need to paint. We have a number of details. We've got, for example, the little sort of vents or thrusters, if you want, on the backpack. These are going to be painted. This bit in the middle needs to be Lead Belcher as well, but I'm going to very carefully go around there. That needs to be all metallic. These tubes that go down the side, we've got the big Doc Ock style grabby arms. I know there's a name for these and I can't remember what they're called. Now when I do these, I'll do these with a bigger brush because this artificial layer brush is a bit too small, so we'll have to paint those. So there's chains all over. You can see all these chains up here. They need to be painted up in Lead Belcher. And then of course, is there anything else on the body? I have painted up the little parts of the gun when I did the brown holster. The big honking blade on here, which again I'm going to use the larger brush for that. So this big blade and this handle here, you can see I've painted this bit gold, so this bit needs to be Lead Belcher. So I'll go and get all this done, and then I bet you can guess what comes after Lead Belcher. I'll give you 5p if you get it right. So you say it out loud and we'll see if you're right. Okay, so that's all the metallic parts painted. Now some of this is guesswork because you can't really see all of it on the box art. It doesn't really show you all things, so I'm assuming that this skull is metallic. It looks kind of metal coloured. I'm guessing half the skull here is metal and the half bone, and a lot of the backpack is kind of guesswork. As you can see a bit of it on the box art, but not a lot. So that's all done. The next step, of course, yes, if you guessed Null Oil or a shade, you were correct. Have 5p. 5p is on its way to you now in a big envelope. So all we're going to do is get our Null Oil and just be generous over all the metallics. Nothing really to explain here. You've seen me do this countless times before. Again, if you've been painting, when you've been painting the metallic, the Lead Belcher, don't have been worried if you've got little bits of Lead Belcher here and there on other parts of the model. That's fine. This will hide any wibbly wobbly lines. And I will swap to a smaller brush when I get to some of the smaller details like the skull on the knee and things like that. Okay, so now the Null Oil's dry, you can see it's looking much better. On the chain glaive, I did do 2 coats of Null Oil, where there's the slightly darker centre part. That's just to make it a little sort of slightly different colour. So it's 2 coats, but everything else was just the 1 coat of Null Oil. So what's next? Next we need to do some dry brushing, and we're going to dry brush again, you may have guessed this, with Iron Breaker. So I've got some here ready. So as before, I'm going to be using circular motions and my knackered old base brush to dry brush. For some of the smaller areas where I want to be a bit more careful, I'll go in for something even smaller and just like an old layer brush or something, just to dry brush the highlights there. But we're doing little circular motions just to make sure I'm not getting any obvious brush marks, and that's just to work my way around all these metal parts and bring back the bling. Okay, that's the metallics done. You can see now they're starting to look a bit more awesome, as they always do. Now we're going to leave them there for now. We're going to come back to the metallics later after the matte varnishing, but for the moment we're done with them. The next thing now is to move on to the thing that's really going to make this figure pop, and that is the cloak or the cowl or whatever you want to call it. And this is going to be a nice red colour. It's going to be a real blast of colour on this kit. So I've got myself some Mephiston Red. Mephiston Red is my favourite colour. And all we're going to do is get the cloak or cowl painted up. And as always with all these things, 2 thin coat. Oh, I said it. Oh, I said it. I've incurred the wrath now. Oh, sorry, Duncan. Yeah, 2 thin coats, not 1 thick coat. If you get 1 thick coat, you get a terrible texture and finish. Go for 2 thin coats, and you can make sure you get a nice, smooth finish. Okay, so that's had a chance to dry. Now you'll notice I did the tassely thing on the chain glaive as well. And also, there were these little metal sticky out bits on the side of his hood that I hadn't even spotted until I painted it red. And I'm like, oh, I better paint them. So I painted them the silver colour. There's also a bit of gold armour under there that I hadn't spotted. I've touched that in, just ready to go. So what's next? Next, you know what's next. Next, it's a shade time. It's time for Nuln Oil. All over the red parts that we've just painted. This is all over the cloak and the tassely bits. While we're waiting for that Nuln Oil to dry, what I can do is busy myself painting the black areas of the undersuit, and this is in the joints between the elbows and the knees where there's the ribbed bit. This is the suit that's under the armour, and this is traditionally black or dark grey. So I'm just going to go and paint some Abba black into these little recesses, and they're on the elbow and on the top of the legs. Okay, now the Nuln Oil is dried, it's looking nice and deep and dark. You could leave the red like that if you wanted to, but I'm going to make it a bit more interesting. I'm going to go back in with the same Mephiston red that I started with. And what I'm going to do is go back over, but I'm just going to focus on the raised areas and try and keep the paint away from where the shade has settled in the recesses. This is just to bring back a highlight. Next up, we need to go lighter again, and with this we're going to go with Evil Sun's Scarlet. And we are going to do a bit of Games Workshop style here. We're going to go for some of the edges. So we're going to really just pick out some of the sharpest edges with the Evil Sun Scarlet. So for example, around the edge of the hood here, we're just going to use a fine line like that. And this is one of the few areas where the GW method does actually look quite good. And then just to finish it off, in some of the tightest and crispiest of corners, we just want a little tiny amount of Screamer Pink, just to really set off those little edges and give them a little extra depth. Okay, the next step, we need to tackle this, whatever this thing is here. It's like an eyeball, it's like an auspex almost, but it's I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know the lore, you see, so I don't know what it is, but it's basically an eyeball. We need to get this thing painted. It's got some fleshy base colours on there. We need to get the actual eyeball painted. Now, I suck at painting eyes, so this may not work. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use a very, very fine, what brush is it? Artificer layer brush. Nice fine point on it, and we're just going to lay in some Celestra Grey just into the middle. I'm going to steady my hands as best I can. Get some Celestra Grey in there. If I mess it up, it's not the end of the world, because I've got to do more painting on the flesh anyway, so it's not so bad. And if I don't get right to the edges, that's fine. You'll see why in a minute. Okay, next up, I need to do the same again, this time with White Scar. So again, I need to make sure I've got a fine point on my brush, and not too much paint, because I don't want a big blob of paint. And I'm going to really just focus this more towards the middle. Once that's dried, we have the super tricky bit, and this is to put the pupil or iris or whatever you want to call it in the middle. And for this, we're just using Abaddon black. I'm just going to try and really carefully paint a line. Now, I'm going to get some paint on the eyelid here, but that's fine. So let's get that done. Bracing my hands. There, it's looking off a little bit to one side, but that's fine. It doesn't have to be looking right down the middle. Okay, and the last step for the actual eyeball itself is to get some Lamenter's Yellow, which is a glaze. It's a clear glaze, a bit like Bloodletter, but yellow. And very carefully, try and work it around the eyelid. Just in there, and just in the corners. I don't want to put on too much, because I don't want the whole eye to go yellow. I just want to suggest a bit of yellow in the corners of the eye. Okay, next we need to sort out the flesh. Now, if you remember, this was painted Rakarth flesh and then given a wash of Crimson Carroburg, or even Carroburg Crimson, get my words right. So what we need to do first of all is bring back the Rakarth flesh just on the raised area, so the little raised details. So I shall get again by a very fine brush, and we'll just slowly work our way around the raised areas, leaving paint in the recesses as best we can. This is just to give the little highlights. Once that's dry, we need to go in with some bloodletter, just to even up the flesh colour a bit and give it some life. And again, bloodletter is a glaze, so it's transparent, so we just need to get this on. Okay, so that's the eyeball done. So what is next? Next, we're going to do something that's going to span both models, and that is bone. Yes, we've got all kinds of bone bits. We've got the skull on the knee here. We've got the bone or horn sticking out of his shoulder there. We've got the face mask. And on the creature, we've got the little sort of claws on the arms on the end of the mouth, which, you know what I mean, they're sort of hooky little bits. They're all going to follow the same basic colour patterns, with one or two exceptions. All the base colours and the highlights are going to be exactly the same, and then a shade at the end might vary them a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to use the standard Games Workshop bone colours, which I love. I think it's brilliant. So we're going to start off with Xandri Dust, which is a lovely colour. It's a good base colour for bones. And we're going to just get this on here like this. Once that's dry, we need to go in with a shade, and the shade we're going to liberally apply is Seraphim Sepia. We're just going to get this all over the bit we've just painted bone, and as always, you can be kind of generous. Next up, once that's dried, if you know me, you know that my favourite paint in this range is Ushabti Bone. Just because the name, I love the name Ushabti Bone. What we need to do here is, you've guessed it, paint over all the flat areas, leaving the shade in the recesses. So this is just to bring back the light areas. And once that's dried, then we just need to go over with some Screaming Skull just on the real sharpest edges, so things like eyebrow ridges and things like that. It's not that defined on this because it's not a real skull, but just around those real crisp edges. And once that's done, this bit of bone work is complete. So I need to go and do this over all the rest of the model now. So like I said, we've got his horns on his shoulder there, and we've got the little sort of toothy, fangy, clawy things on the mouth parts of the slig face of the beast. Okay, so that's the skulls all done, all the bones and bits and bobs. I differentiated the horns on the shoulder with a couple of extra coats of Agrax Urge just to darken them up or give them a brown tinge. And the skulls on the backpack, I just gave them a very quick, very thin coat of Athonian camo shade, just to give them a slight green tinge. Make it look like they've been on there for a while, maybe all the flesh has decomposed off and they look a bit mingy. Now, next is a stage that you won't need to do if, unlike me, he didn't break the reins, and that is to paint the easy line that I put all over the reins to repair the damage when I snap them. Of course, if you've not added the easy line, you can do. I quite like the look of it. But we're going to make these look like some kind of a rope. Or cord. So what I'm going to do is use Talon sand. I've got it on the wet palette, and I'm going to thin it down a bit more than normal because I want it to go into all the little gaps where I've looped it over many times. I don't want it to make just a block of paint. So I'm going to go around and get all these bits done, and of course all the bits around the hand as well, around here, and try and get all this painted. So I'll get all this base coated first. Next, I'm going to paint these remnants of wooden spears that the skulls are hanging off, and for that we're just going to go in with some Xandri Dust first of all. Once that's dried and I've painted the ropes up here with the Talon sand, we can then go over both the ropes and the poles with Agrax Earthshade to darken them up. And what I'm going to do is one coat of Agrax on the ropes and two coats of Agrax on the wood, just to make them a bit different because they are very similar. Also, the second coat of Agrax will make the wood of the poles look a bit different to the skulls. Next up, we're going to do the elemental effect on the chain glaive here, and it's this little arrow shape that's an indented recess. And what we want to do is we want to fill this with an orangey sort of glazy colour. Now, orange over the metal colour won't really work. So what we're going to do, first of all, I've got a mix of Larmian Medium, about 5 brushfuls of Larmian Medium to 1 brushful of White Scar. I've got that here. And I'm just going to do it like a wash. The reason I've got the lime in medium, of course, is to thin it. So I'm going to get some on my brush, and we're just going to place it into the little recess as neatly as we can. That's probably too much on that. As neatly as I can. I don't want to be brushing it in, I want to place the brush over it. Once that's dry, we're going to go in and do exactly the same now, but instead of the white, we're going to use 6 blobs of lime in medium and 1 blob of Fire Dragon Bright. By blob, I mean sort of, brushful. I'm going to do this like a glaze. We're just going to lay it where the white is. Now you can. I'm going to actually go around the edges a little bit. I'm not going to paint it exactly over the white. I'm going to go outside the lines just a touch, just to give a slight glow effect. So I might go right up to the edge of the sword there. I'm going to give that a moment to dry, and then I can come back and do a second coat. But on the second coat, I'll focus mostly on the arrow itself and not so much on the outside edge, and that's how I'll build up a kind of glow effect. And there we go, that's the glaze complete. So you can see the effect I was going for now, this kind of orange glow around the edge, kind of a bit of object source lighting almost, but I'm not very good at OSL, so let's just say it's a bit of an ethereal glow. But the reason it does that is because we made a glaze. That was what we made, it was a glaze. It's mostly clear medium, so the lime medium, with a little bit of the orange, and the more layers you apply to the surface, the less transparent it gets. 1 layer is pretty much transparent, you can see through it. Then 2 layers, a little less, 3 layers, a little less, eventually to where you get it completely opaque. You would have a lot of layers though. And the only reason the arrow stands out more is because that had white paint underneath, whereas the rest of it, the glow on the outside was on the dark grey black area. So the same amount of coat over black gives it a slight orange tinge, over white makes it just orange. So there you go, that is now done, and that's how you do a glaze. I will do some more glaze videos coming up in the future. It's just on this is so small, it's not really something I can put a lot of effort into filming for you because you can't really see it. I need to do a separate glaze video for you. But that is why you make a glaze with medium and not with water, because with water, that wouldn't have worked. Anyway, that's pretty much almost everything I need to do on the figure for now. There are only 2 things left to do on him. Well, technically there's 3 things. However, I'm not hand painting and freehanding a Chaos logo on the flag. I probably could, but then I probably could also mess it up, and I don't want to take that risk, so I'm not going to freehand. If I do at some point come across some water slide decals with a Chaos symbol on, of course I might just slap that on there. I had a look in my Renegade Imperial Knight set, but there isn't one of the right size or the right design, so I couldn't do that. So I'm not going to paint that on there, I'm not going to ruin it. But I did give it a shade of Drakenhof Nightshade just to make it all blend together, so it's a nice bluey colour, but the highlights I've just kind of blended into the background colour a bit more. The only thing I really need to do on this now is paint the little light on the side of the Auspex, and then of course go over the metallics of the gold and the silver with some highlight coats, but that'll be done after the matte varnish. So with nothing else to do on here apart from the light, which I can do later on because I've got some to do on the beast as well, I'll go and get him attached to the beast, and then we'll do those last few bits. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours. I went and had my dinner. Everything's now glued in place, looking rather spanky. And you'll notice it's not as shiny now. I gave it a coat of matte varnish, and for that I used Humbrol 49 acrylic rattle can varnish. Now I can't film using it because I do it outdoors. Any rattle cans you want to do outdoors. But here's a handy dandy guide to how to spray rattle can varnish. How to apply your matte top coat. You're going to need to go outside so you don't gas everybody with the really stinky fumes. You're going to need yourself, obviously, or a suitable idiot. Yeah, very good. If you can get someone really small so they can fit in shot, that would also be cool. Can't get the staff. You're going to need your model that you're going to top coat. Yes, that's it. Well done. You're going to need some matte varnish. I'm using Humbrol 49 acrylic rattle can. And no, don't huff the matte varnish. And you may want to wear some gloves. You don't have to, but it just saves you getting your hands covered in matte varnish and then having to wash that off, which can be a right pain in the where do I get these people? Thumb in the thumb hole. Yes, there you go. Much better. I don't pay him enough, or I pay him far too much. I'm not quite sure which one it is. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we're going to actually top coat the model itself first. You can see here I've got any little accessories on sticks. These are just barbecue skewers. You can't make pew pew noises when you're being silent. thank you. They're just on barbecue skewers with alligator clips stuck on the end. Now, get your can of matte varnish, give it a darn good shake. Shake the living poop out of it. You want it to be really, really mixed. Yeah, I think it's mixed now. You could just get on with it, honestly. Now, don't press the button straight away. Press it away from the model, pan it across the model, and release the button. Again, press it away from the model, pan it past the model, and release the button. The reason to do that is that when you first press the button, you'll get blobs of stuff coming out as it's congealed in the nozzle, and you don't want that going on your model. This way you guarantee a steady flow. Let's go. Press, pan, release, press, pan, release, press. Sorry, I'm almost singing there. I do apologise. Now he's keeping it about... I'm talking in third person, it's me, you idiot. Keep it about 30 centimetres or so from the model. Go in light coats. Don't try and get everything at once, and don't hold the can in one place. If you don't think you've got enough, give it a little time to dry, and then come back and apply a second coat. But go in light coats. That way you avoid building up large amounts of varnish or top coat, and you avoid big blobs where it pools. So do a light coat, let it dry for 15-20 minutes depending on how long the drying time is for your varnish, and then have a look at it. If you think it needs more, just repeat the process. You can see here I'm doing the accessories on the sticks. Again, I'm keeping them about 18 to 20 to 30 centimetres per arm's length, and I'm doing the press, pan and release. I'm not pressing the nozzle pointing at the thing I'm spraying, because I want fine mist, not blebs, from the nozzle of the tin. It's kind of not very exciting to watch this, I know that. It's even less exciting for me to have watched it for the 6th time and to be narrating over it. But I make these sacrifices for you. Give it one last blast. Make sure to get it from all sides. Get it from above as well. Just giving it one last blast. I'll come back in about half an hour and give it more if I think it needs more. I will also come back and do the feet and underneath later on. Yeah, the fumes can get quite bad, that's why you do it outside. But we are job done. So there you go, now you know how to rattle can matte varnish. So that's done. Only a few more steps to do now. One of them will take quite a while and some of them are really, really quick. First and foremost, we need to do something with the ooze on the mandible parts here. Now you can see I've painted them in white scar ready for what we're going to do. I was originally going to do them the same colour as the green in the syringe, but I realised it's not supposed to be the same thing as the syringe. It's supposed to be a different colour completely, which explains why on the box model the ooze is green but the syringe is blue. So I've done the syringe green. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make them out like blood, not like anything else, not like drool from the beast. I'll just make it like blood, like it's had a bit of a go at someone. So for that we're going to use something I haven't had a chance to use yet. Blood for the blood god. Yes, this is one of those rare paints where you can take it straight from the pot. You're listening, Chris? Watch this, straight from the pot. And all you do, I've coated it in white first just to give it a nice base. Going to get some on the brush. And you want to do it in gobby lumps. You want to use it thickly because it's like jam. And it is just supposed to signify and simulate blood. So all I want to do is get that on there. Be really over generous with it. Get it all over that. And I'll get some on here as well. Get it just all spread around. And you want it to bobble and bulge and be all sort of drippy and droopy. All over these white bits. Next up we need to take care of 3 lights. We have the light on the camera here and there's 2 eyes on the front of the face, and for this it's just 2 simple colours. First of all we're going to go in with some white scar and we're just going to do a touch of white over each of the 3 sort of lenses as it were. So very carefully, nice pointy brush, and just touch that in. Then once that's dry we need to go in with some Spirit Stone Red, and yes Chris, I'm taking this straight from the pot because there's another colour you can take straight from the pot, and we're just going to touch this. We're going to move that out of the way, get a nice big blob of it, and we're just going to touch it to the centre of the light fitting. It's a clear crystal colour so you can just touch it too and let it pool by itself. There we go. Okay, we're nearing the end now. Yes. Now is my favourite step, one of my favourite steps, something I've been looking forward to since I got the gold paint on here originally, and that's now bringing back the bling to the gold. And if you remember, we've got Retributor armor with some Rykel and Flesh Shade, that's now been matte varnished. Now we need to bring back the bling. So I have some Auric armor gold, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply this first of all over the gold we've already done. But as before, as with all the other layering we've done, we're going to try and avoid any recesses and just really put it in the flat open areas. Now it's not particularly a bright or bold gold colour, but it'll just stand out nicely and bring back some shine. So I'm going to go around and get all the gold on here. This is probably going to take me just as long as it did to paint the gold in the first place, so I'll see you in about 6 hours. Okay, and that's all the gold trim done to that point. It's not finished yet, there's still more to do. But you can see it's looking a lot more interesting now. It's looking a lot more shiny again. I hope that you're picking up the shine on the camera there. It certainly is when you look at it in the right light. But before we finish the gold trim, we're going to hop on to doing something else. We're going to do these exhausts. Remember we said we hadn't finished the exhaust yet. Now for this we want to get a sort of heat stain look. And this is dead easy. We did them in Balthazar Gold, gave them 2 or 3 coats, I think it was about 3 coats of the Agrax Earth Shade. So now we're going to go back in with Retributor armour. Yes, I know, weird, isn't it? Well, let's get some ready. We're going to do a dry brush. Oh, so as always, you know how this works. Bit of Retributor armour on the brush. I'm using a base brush, an old base brush again. Remember, if you're going to do dry brushing with the base brush, because they are good small dry brushes, make sure you use an old one, because they won't last long. And all we're going to do is we're going to dry brush very lightly over the exhaust, and we're going to go in an upward direction, or from one end to the other, and we want to make the gold heavier at this end but fade out towards the top, because the top of the exhaust where the hole is needs to be just basically brown. So we're going to go in. If it's big enough you can use the circular motions. Circular? Did I just say circular? Oh dear. But if not, just use a bottom to top movement like this. You can use a much smaller brush if it's hard to get to. I'm just using this because it's about the right size. Okay, so that's the dry brushing done. You can see the kind of effect I was going for there. Apologies, it was kind of covered up by most of his cloak. Yeah, I'm special, what can I say? So we've got this dry brush effect now from the bottom to the top. And as you can see, it has actually highlighted on some of the edges of these holes and the raised areas. So it just gives that nice effect of having the darkness inside the hole and outside the hole, but the raised area highlighted a little bit. We've got one last little step to do on this, and this is to do a bit more dry brushing, but with a silver colour. And for this, we are going to use, you can't really see it on the label, it was Vallejo Metal Colour 77702 Duraluminum. I love this. Now we're going to be dry brushing this. I'm going to give it a good shake. Let's get some off on a little piece of something. It's a very thin paint. You don't want to put this on your wet palette because it's too thin. So I've got it on a little bit of tin there, and we're going to dry brush it using, this is an old one, but just using a regular brush. You can dry brush with normal brushes. It's a bit fiddlier. So what we're going to do, we're going to get some paint on there. It's very thin. You put this on your wet palette, you basically just got water. We'll get most of it off on the tissue. And then what we will do is get that, and we're just going to work again from the base up. A bit too much on there. Take the excess off on my hand. Work from the base up, but only go, say, halfway up. Can you see that now? Is the cloak in the way? There we go. Just say from the base upwards and only halfway up the gold. We don't want to go up as far as we did with the gold, because we want the gold to be the blend between the sort of brown and the metallic at the bottom. So it's really minimal, and then up here we can just very carefully dry brush it over, say, the vent holes. So we're really focusing on this bottom sort of third here. I don't know if it'll come out on camera, but what you want by the end is this beautiful fade between the duraluminum I've just dry brushed on there, the gold here in the middle, and then the brown colour at the top. And what you can do is just to pick out the edges at the very top with the duraluminum. Once you've done everything else, you've got almost nothing on the brush here at all. You can see it's not going to do any favours to your brush, so don't use a good brush. Again, use an old brush. That's why you don't throw old brushes away. This is an Army Painter Regiment. It's a really good brush and not cheap, but I've not thrown it away because it's great for things like this. So I'll go around and I'll get the rest of these exhausts done. With that done, what I'm going to do now is go around the rest of all the silver metallic areas with the same paint, with the duraluminum, and just dry brush slowly my way around, just to bring back a bit of brightness. But in this kind of case, I am going to stick to mostly edges. I'm not going to be worrying too much about getting the big flat areas. All this is going to do is going to bring some lightness to the edges and a little bit of shine, because it'll be shinier than the matte varnished lead belcher. Okay, so that's all those metallics done. Hopefully, as you can see, it just started to make things pop really nicely. And not only just the metallic colours themselves, but also the golds, which have just had bits, patchy bits here and there. It's not like a Games Workshop edge highlight job, which I'm not that good at, and I don't know, it looks a bit cartoony to me. I like a slightly more naturalistic look, so it's just every now and then on edges and some areas I've got a little bit of the metallic showing through, and it just makes everything really come to life. Now there's only really a handful of steps left, and that is to sort out the base. We're kind of done with the model for now, so it's just the base that's left. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a texture on this base, and we're going to use a Grelin Earth. Now a Grelin Earth is a texture paint, and it's super thick. You could tip it up, it won't come out of the pot, it's rock hard. And the trick with this stuff is basically, what do you need to do, Ted?
Slap it on.
Exactly, we're just going to slap it on. Now you could paint under here, you could paint this black or brown or whatever colour you want, because it's going to be a crackle paint. It's going to come up like cracked dried mud. And sometimes, you know, you can see the colour underneath. Not too fussed if it's silver, because we're going to put a wash over it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some Grelin Earth on my brush. Now you really don't want to use your good brushes for this. You want to use old brushes. I've actually got some old brushes that I have just for this purpose. And all you do is really blob it on your base and then spread it around. Try and be careful not to get it on, obviously, the model. Now the real trick is the size of the crackle depends on how thick the paint goes on. So if you put it on thick or thin, depending on how you do it, you'll get different sized crackles. So experiment with different thicknesses. You don't want to do it too thin though. You want to be fairly generous and get a fairly big fat pile of it on there, just for the biggest crackles. You'll see what I mean when you try it. Try it on a spoon or something, or a bit of plastic first if you're not sure. And that's the effect we're looking for, this lovely, lovely crackled earth effect. Now it does take a certain amount of skill to know exactly how crackly it's going to be, depending on how much you've put on. I haven't got that skill, I just slap it on and hope it looks good. Sometimes I get really massive crackles, sometimes I get tiny ones. I don't mind, it all looks fantastic. But you do need to give it a while, maybe an hour and a half to fully cure off. I would also recommend, once you've finished doing whatever you need to do on the base, just to lock all this in place, go over it with a matte varnish, just to make sure you lock all these flakes in, because they're fairly sturdy, but they can be easily dislodged. So what we need to do now is just tie in the model to the base, because you've got this nice dusty earthy base, and you've got a nice clean model. Yeah, we're not having that. We need to do a little bit of dry brushing, and also there's little bits where perhaps we've got some of the base showing through the Grelin Earth, because it didn't get coverage. So we need to fix that. Dead easy. You'll be glad to know this Grelin Earth is a real good match for Steel Legion Drab, which is a wonderful colour. I love Steel Legion Drab. And what we're going to do is we're going to, you guessed it, dry brush. Initially, we're going to do two things. First of all, dry brush. So we're going to dry brush on the model where it meets the ground, just to make sure there's a tally between the dust it's walking around on and it would pick some up. So as always, little circular motions. I'm not going to go too far up, just a bit, just to get some dusty effects on every foot. What I might do as well is put a little bit on the base of his cloak, just to make it interesting. I need some more though. Reload. It does take a while doing dry brushing. I love dry brushing. So I need to go around, do this on all the feet. Not, as I say, not too far up, just a little bit, just to give a dust effect. Tie it into the base. And one of the last things we need to be doing is putting some foliage onto the base. I'm using the Games Workshop Middenland Tufts, which are little tufts of fake grass. Now they are self-adhesive, but I like to give them a helping hand and just put a little tiny touch of super glue underneath on the self-adhesive bit, and then just plonk them down. And you can do as many or as few as you like on these. Go wild with them, have some fun. I like to just put them in random places. They're also handy for covering up little bits where perhaps some of the texture paint or something has come off. So go wild with them, have some fun. Other flora and fauna products are, of course, available. And as the spinny thing hoves into view, that means only one thing. It means I've gone round the bottom of the base with the Abaddon Black. And job is done. Everything is complete. Build is finished. Now, I know I said at the start, you know, in the first episode, we had some little niggles with bits not fitting and instructions not being clear. There were minor wrinkles. At the end of the day, this is still a beautiful little kit. A great joy to build. Absolute dream to paint. Lots and lots of fun, even though it took me approximately 3.5 trillion hours to paint all the gold in the world. It was still great fun. And those of you out there who are, you know, starting to get into doing YouTube of model making and making tutorials and stuff, just as an example, it's taken me about 2 weeks to do all this, to get all this filmed and painted. In reality, this would have taken me maybe 2 to 3 days to build and paint. It's taken me 2 weeks because I've been filming it. So those of you who are starting out and just thinking about doing tutorial videos, keep that in mind. A simple build can suddenly take 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 times as long when you're filming. So do keep that in mind. You had a lot of patience when you're doing this stuff, especially when I was doing the gold trim. It was like, oh, how long now? Now, if you're looking at getting this kit yourself and giving it a bit of a build, my advice will be, just based on what I've learned building this, as I did, leave the figure off completely. Don't attach the figure. You're going to have a whole world of hurt if you try and paint the figure on the beast. It's just not going to be fun at all. So do like I did, leave the figure off. Just be very, very careful with those reins when you're handling it. Don't keep putting him on and off and on and off. Just get him on there to get everything lined up, take him off again and leave it until it's finished and painted, and then you can glue him on. I would say as well, if I was building this again, I would leave the legs off. It would make life a lot easier if I hadn't glued the legs on, and looking back on it, now I'd assembled it, it's actually very easy to glue the legs on even when it's fully painted. It would have been an absolute doddle. It just plop them in place, bit of glue, done. So I would leave the legs off. You might also want to consider leaving things like the helmet over the head off. If you want to paint the full head, you have to anyway. But even if you just want to get into the mouth parts there, leave that helmet off for ease of access, and leave these sort of, I was going to say pauldrons on the beast, on the 2 front legs, those sort of shoulder parts, the shoulder armour. Might want to leave those off as well. Again, just to give yourself access to paint some of the bits and bobs. There's a couple of bits that should be gold trim that I couldn't paint because I couldn't get to them. But nobody will ever know, and because I've not told anyone. Shh. But yes, if you're thinking of getting this, absolutely, whether you're a gamer and a maker or whether you're just a maker, it's 40 to 45 quid. Usual caveats with Games Workshop's non-standard pricing because it's not a normal model kit. Their usual caveats apply, but ultimately, yes, it's a great little kit. I'd recommend it. It's good fun. It's good practice on your straight lines and your trim, and just go and have lots of fun with it. Anyway, that's going to do me. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. I hope this painting guide has been useful for you. I hope you've learned a lot. Do send me pictures of yours. Stick them up in the Boom Hut, facebook.com/model-boom-hut. Love to see how you get on with yours. And until next time, I shall say, go make something awesome. Go be awesome. And until next time, adios, amigos.